Thank you, and thank you, everybody. Green Hudson, I would just like to say thank you for all the work that you've done. I think that you've made Hudson much more aware of options and much more open to seeking answers in the way that the town works. And it has been really special to watch. So thank you for the work that you have been doing. I'm glad tonight to bring you updates on my efforts. I will try to move along. I hope that there's a little nerdle of nerd in everybody, because it is a little bit of a deep dive, but not too bad. I'll keep it moving quickly, but and I'm going to assume that I want to give a little bit of everything, whether you're familiar with PFAS or not. I'll just touch on it just so we all know and we're all on the same page. But so PFAS are chemicals first invented in the 1930s. Your parents or grandparents used these new and wonderful products like non-stick cookware, those kinds of things that came out in the 50s and the 60s, Teflon being a great invention at the time, food packaging, water-resistant clothing, cosmetics, firefighting foam. We'll be coming back to all of that, which in fact came back to haunt us. So exposure to PFAS is associated with various and adverse health effects, as we're all becoming very aware of over time. We have detected PFAS basically across the state. There are sites that are hotter than others, we like to call it. Stowe, for instance, is very hot. There are many sites there that doesn't really explain itself, but there they are. We know that there's PFAS in Hudson as well. They're in the public water systems, private wells, rivers. ORS has done some really important and groundbreaking work on PFAS in our rivers. Groundwater, soil, wastewater. It's at military installations across the state, and we've been able to find those, and there's been a lot of first negotiations and then remediation that's happened. It's considered the airports, the fire training stations, primary source of PFAS contamination, and of course we go back to the foam for that. Industries with greatest number of facilities that would be handling PFAS, electronics, waste management. You can see up here all of them as we go through. State sampling requires new water source satellite wells, a replacement to be tested for a minimum of 14 compounds, and a maximum of 18 compounds. So we're able to identify that many PFAS compounds. There are thousands of PFAS compounds, which is when you begin writing a bill, realize you can't just identify one in isolation. When you're saying they need to be regulated, you cannot begin to name just one, because then it's a whack-a-mole situation where they'll just use another kind of PFAS chemical or compound. So DEP has provided well testing programs to communities, and I know Stowe in particular has benefited greatly, and I know that we're doing some work at Hudson on Lake Boone right now around contamination, and that DEP recommends that private wells within a 1 to 2 mile range of a known source undergo testing. So we have been working on that in all of our towns and communities across the Commonwealth. So you can see that all of these public water systems have detected PFAS, whether they're community water, non-transient, non-community, or transient, non-community, which is just a combination of how water is delivered to all of us. And it has, it's proven to be quite robust in so many different areas in ways that we can't really explain. But we know that in Hudson, for me, my journey began in 2019 when I got a phone call and it said water tests show that PFAS is over 70 parts per trillion. Oh, that's bad. Oh, that's very bad. And they began telling folks that they should not drink their water. You've all been through it. I don't want to re-traumatize you, but water was brought in, and so began the journey of figuring how you deal with PFAS. And it was traced to the Cranberry Well. In the long run, we negotiated a settlement with two parties. It's really one party, but two different companies at the same facility, which is right there at the Cranberry Well, why you would have a company like that right next to a well, but there we were. So we were able to negotiate settlements which helped us set up some of the filtration, and were able to overcome some of the challenges around funding, permitting, procurement, to purchase a PFAS filtration system installed in 2019 outdoors, and really an amazing feat that Hudson was able to accomplish all of that. Because the good thing about PFAS, if there is anything good about it, is it can be treated. So you can bring on your filtration systems, you can treat it, you can remove it, and I know that Hudson has not seen or have detected PFAS in the water since the filtration systems have been installed, and that really is a testimony to the town government, Eric Ryder, DPW. I mean, DPW folks, amazing, just doing workarounds until they figured out how they could do something that would stand the test of time. They just really brought in filters, figured out how to keep them there and how to move your water through it. So that was sort of how it went, and state action has come, certainly come with regulation, testing, funding, public education, legislation and litigation. We have done some of that in the bill that I had put forward. For regulation, we were looking to establish a maximum contaminant level 20 parts per trillion right now. There's 4 parts per trillion, but it's a complicated and confusing formula, and nothing has been set in stone in that regard. So we know that there are ways that we're approaching it in terms of regulation. In February 23, EPA announced $2 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law for states to address PFAS in drinking water. We're still dealing with some of those monies coming down to the state. In April 24, they finalized new guidelines. And in January 25, the Trump administration withdrew EPA plans to limit effluent PFAS, froze further federal regulations. So for all of it, we come to, as we move along this path, we come to sort of a stop. And we'll see where we are in the near future, but it will be difficult to move forward at present. And with the funding, Massachusetts, we provided over $800 million to communities to help address PFAS, mostly through the state revolving fund, which does so much for clean water trusts at zero interest loans. They've been able to do a lot to help towns set up their own systems. $30 million has been appropriated for PFAS testing and remediation. So much of that is important when a town first realizes they have contamination, to figure out where it is, the extent of it. And 41 towns have been awarded a total of like $10 million to respond to their PFAS contamination. So we've been able to focus funding on this problem. And as you can see, it's requires a lot of money, because so much of it has to do with first identifying, putting together a plan, and then remediating, depending on the size or the extent of the contamination. So we've been able to do all of those things, and federal action, as I said, we're just waiting to see what happens over the next few months, as we know things have stalled. So comes the Mass PFAS Act, an act to protect Massachusetts public health from PFAS, and that it has been written both by myself and Julian Sear in the Senate, with the help of many other folks involved in dealing with PFAS in the legislature. And in the last legislative session, we were able to bring this bill forward through committee. It passed both chambers, and unfortunately it did not pass into law last session. We were trying to get it finished and passed at the same time, which can sometimes be difficult. So But it includes a provision that eliminates PFAS in firefighting protective gear, and we were able to actually pass that last session, somewhere around midnight on July 31st. So we were very glad to see that passed. One piece has come out. Other regulations have been picked up also from the report by public health and other agencies of government. So we work to champion it through the legislature. We'll come back. We've worked on it a little bit. We're going to come back with it this year. We have filed it. And it will, we're hoping that it's really going to go somewhere this year, as we have a lot riding on it for Massachusetts. So some of the highlights of the act include establishing a remediation trust fund. And basically what that is going to do is grants to municipalities, community water systems, and all of them being as complicated as they sound in terms of what they are and how they provide water to their communities. But it addresses the contamination in drinking water, groundwater, and soil, and municipalities may use grants to assist private well users. Private wells are a funny thing in Massachusetts because public health supposedly are the folks that oversee them, but they're really not very aggressive about the fact that they oversee private wells, and so oftentimes it falls on DEP, for instance, doing the remediation, but they're not necessarily the ones that have the control over private wells. So we sit in an odd area in those towns that have the private wells, and how they're going to be regulated, or how we're going to be able to deliver resources to them. It becomes a little bit complicated, but it would expand eligible recipients and spending above and beyond those that receive it from the revolving fund. Again, the revolving fund sometimes has problems with private wells, so we would make that more expansive to those folks that do have private wells. It directs settlements from the state's PFAS lawsuits, which there are many out there. We're probably not going to see any now for maybe a year or so, but we will see suits and we will see money coming back to the state, which we want to make sure goes into a fund that's then sent out to the various towns that need it for remediation. And it will be administered by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And that's the remediation trust fund. What we also do is regulate PFAS in food packaging and consumer products. And what that means is that we create a timeline for phasing out PFAS in food packaging and consumer products. And what we try to do is define PFAS as a class for the regulation of food packaging. And by 2030, PFAS will be prohibited in food packaging and certain priority products. What we mean by priority products are those things that have intense pathways into the body. So all children's toys, cosmetics, those things that you're putting on your body, those things that are just, really accumulating PFAS from whatever it might be. And so child passenger restraints, cookware, fabric treatments, personal care products, all of that. The timeline gives manufacturers time to develop alternatives, but it doesn't spend a whole lot of time doing that. We know and have seen industry, have talked to industry, and they know they need to get PFAS out of everything. And we're seeing them working on it now, and so the negotiating the timeline is based on being able to remove PFAS as we move forward in a clear, comprehensive way, and everybody will understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and that there is a timeline that needs to be adhered to. So the updates to the private wells, we direct Mass DEP to update the guidelines and model Board of Health legislation to include PFAS in drinking water. We know private well users are impacted intensely, and they need assistance with the cost of sampling and remediation. We conducted a private well sampling program among communities DEP did, where the majority of residents rely on private wells for drinking water. At least 21 of the communities have private wells that tested for PFAS over 20 parts per trillion. So that's a heavy dose of PFAS, and for that many communities. And that is when many of the towns are required to test, and there are probably many more out there that just have not necessarily found themselves in a situation where they're testing their wells. But they are regulated, essentially by the Board of Health rather than the state. As I said, it's sort of an interesting issue in that the PFAS Act directs Mass DEP to update the guidelines and model Board of Health legislation to include PFAS in the drinking water, as I said. But these would be guidelines, not necessarily regulations. They most recently updated guidelines at DEP in 2024, and the trust fund that we spoke about earlier incentivizes the local boards of health to implement PFAS testing in private wells for property sales and new construction. So anything that comes in, anything that's being sold, you need to test for PFAS before you pass it along, and it would either need to be remediated and negotiated, or how you're going to do it, but nobody would be buying a residence without knowing if there was PFAS in it. And that those towns that implemented these regulations would be eligible for the funding to establish a rebate program for private well users. So once they are able to identify, we can help them with what they may need to remediate their PFAS. Eligible spending for the rebate program would include the cost of sampling private well water for PFAS and the purchase of some home treatment systems to remove PFAS from the drinking water. So these are all part of the bill that we have currently filed in the legislature. It's a big bill, but it's not unwieldy. It really tries to take things under the subject matter and the issues that have risen to the top and the priorities that exist, like reducing PFAS in wastewater. And we'll be regulating the wastewater to prevent contamination of the water table and groundwater, which further impacts our communities. And we know that for certain. And we're taking a measured approach to address the very complex issue of PFAS and biosolids. I don't know if folks are familiar with that, but we want to make sure that any action the state takes will solve the problem rather than kick the can down the road or even create new problems. We do not have enough landfills to accommodate all the biosolids and incineration, and it's not a great option for PFAS. Similar to the upstream approach we're taking with food packaging and consumer products, the bill prevents PFAS from entering the wastewater in the first place. So what we're trying to do when we set up regulations is to get it at the source. We know we can remediate, but what we need to do is stop the source. We need to stop where it's coming from, and we can deal with what we have in the water, but we need to be able to have much more control over preventing PFAS from showing up in all of our waters and soils. So we are, in the meantime, laser focused on stopping PFAS from contaminating our environment and waste streams in the first place. Mass DEP has been conducting a sludge study right now as we speak, and they've issued part one of the report. It can be found on our website and I believe the DEP website as well, and focuses on the current and near-term destinations of Massachusetts and where and how. The second phase of the report will become available later this year. So those are trying to deal with many of the other aspects of PFAS in the soil. So we move from water to soil. And the other really important piece of the bill is protecting firefighters from elevated exposure to forever chemicals. And as I said, we're able to sign 2902 in August, and it required notifying purchasers that firefighter gear contains PFAS. And in 2027, manufacturers are prohibited from knowingly selling or distributing gear that contains PFAS. their challenge right now is to find something that will replace PFAS because of the temperatures it can bear, obviously, in firefighting gear. And so that is what they've been working on in that industry. And I know that some gear has already been produced, and they're trying to see how it assimilates and how it's going to be working for firefighters. So, but we've had definitely some success, as I said, both with regulation and language, and this particular piece of the bill being able to begin the task of dealing with PFAS, remediating PFAS, and getting rid of PFAS. We also expand our outreach to environmental justice communities. As you find in so many instances, there's a heavy concentration of PFAS in those communities. And EEA actually has created outreach and educational materials for environmental justice communities. Again, something that's come out of the actual task force that we had in the report and the bill, suggesting that would be really important so that everyone knows there are chances of PFAS in their community, and that it would be linguistically diverse and culturally competent so that people would be able to quickly understand and be able to react to contamination in all communities. And so, as I said, the 193rd, which was the last session, not this one, we're in the 194th session, has received broad support throughout the House and Senate. A provision for the bill that eliminates PFAS in firefighting protective gear was passed, and I worked with council to strengthen the bill and refiled along with Julie and Sierra in the Senate, and look forward to championing it. I continue to meet with stakeholders and gather input. It is very complicated in many, many ways, and if you want to get involved, please write to your legislators, let them know to support it. We can educate communities and continue to and support organizations that advocate for PFAS mitigation. So that is, I hope I didn't bore you too much, but that is PFAS, that is what we were doing, and that is our legislation. So questions? Yes?
Well, thank you so much. That was great information, and thank you for your work on this and trying to get the bill through last year. And two questions. One, if you would keep in touch with us at Green Hudson and let us know when hearings coming up.
Absolutely.
What committee has been assigned to, what hearing it comes up, so we can get information out, a template letter so that people can write in or actually come to the State House for testimony.
Great.
And who's the opposition right now at this point?
There really is an opposition. It's really that it is a large bill, it has many components, and that there's money. And so that becomes a harder, heavier bill to carry. But I know that the support is there for the bill. I mean, industry knows they can't keep putting PFAS in products. I mean, it's not good business at this point. So it's really trying to negotiate that time, quicken the time, and give everyone the opportunity to change over, which people are doing already. But it's not fair for people that are trying to do it in an industry without giving a deadline, so everybody has to do it. So that's where we stand with that. But we really haven't had a lot of pushback from, again, some of it is technical, so PFAS works well in gear for our firefighters. We're looking for a compound that can match it for being able to bear the kind of heat that it can provide protection for our firefighters. And they're having a little bit of a hard time, it seems, getting that done, but the gauntlet has been laid down that we need to look at it, that you need to find it, and we need to get it out and in gear by a certain date. So, yes.
What about other things like regular street clothes and furniture?
Consumer products. Yeah. We have a timeline for that as well. And as I said, we also have priority products, especially those that have pathways into the body. So as you say, something that's going directly on, cosmetics, child restraints, toys that have it, things that you're touching, that you're putting on your body, those intense pathways that are going to help you accumulate a lot of PFAS in your body over time.
What scares me is the furniture. I think they're still selling the sprays that cause stain-resistant sprays that are causing the PFAS.
Yeah, there needs to be,
I see it, and I'm like,
yeah. And those would be
I
our
think a lot of
first.
people don't know.
And it's our highest priority is to begin, consumer products. It's, as I said in the bill, it's really one of our highest products, next to drinking water, and then those things that are being baked. Our firefighters are just in a terrible position of having those PFAS right in your vest. Yes?
Yeah, 2 questions. If the bill does not pass this year, is that 2030 deadline still going to stand, or is that going to bump to 2031?
That would be a negotiation. I'm not sure. I mean, I wouldn't want to say it probably would change.
Okay.
Because you're giving a certain amount of time. By the same token, I believe that industry is hard at work developing all sorts of industries, developing new products that don't contain the PFAS compounds. So
Okay.
it would definitely be a negotiation.
And is there anything in the bill to help, like Board of Health, like educate the public that may not be aware that basically like they're like Teflon pan in the house maybe?
Yeah, we again, as I said, that the Department of Public Health would be the place where we would do our educating.
Okay.
Using them as sort of the source for education around PFAS into communities and making people aware of the dangers of PFAS.
Okay.
Just to follow up about the consumer goods, do manufacturers have to tell people that there's PFAS in whatever they do? Are they required to, or you don't know?
I think that's a good point.
I'm just curious. I mean, we went through all this other stuff with like high fructose corn syrup, and they're required to say it.
Or trans fats or something.
Or trans fats, yeah. Are they,
No.
has there ever been any conversation about that?
Well, yeah, and that would be part of the bill as well. So.
God knows I probably am living surrounded by
Yeah.
PFAS.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is terrifying.
I think that's
Yes.
a good point.
How insulated is the language in these bills from EPA regulations given the current political dumpster fire at the federal level?
I mean, it doesn't seem like they're engaging in an intellectual way. It just seems like they're breaking stuff. So.
Is there a provision that says that the state level has to be better or equal to the federal level, or some sort of dependency?
Yeah, what do you mean? I mean, in terms of, wasn't written anticipating.
If the EPA regulations get reverted.
Our state would be able to and has had lower thresholds.
And that'll be maintained regardless.
We would maintain it in the state.
Yeah, okay. And is there any extra work going on around this for research? PFAS is bad, microplastics are bad, put them both together and you get a super cocktail of bad. Is there anything that we're doing at the state level that clearly the NIH is never going to do now?
I couldn't tell you that. I'm not informed in that way, but I have seen a lot of research going on at places like WPI. We saw a lot of what they were working on really was how you rid yourself of PFAS without trying to dump it places or incinerate, but really take it to the point where it no longer exists when you're bringing it to be taken care of, as it were. So I couldn't say that at this time, but I'm sure that there are ways to talk about that. Yes?
It's probably a basic question. PFAS are called the forever chemical. And just to explain that to a person who doesn't really know, is that kind of like plastics that they never fully break down, or what? Because on one hand...
Yes, I mean, essentially what it is once it gets in your body, it doesn't really break down. And why we are so concerned to start with those that have the greatest ability to accumulate in your body, because they do not break down in a time frame that would allow for you to have it, to absorb it, and then have it pass through your body. It just stays. It is a forever chemical in your body. So, and it also accumulates.
Yeah, anywhere in particular? I know they're finding plastic. tends to go to the brain more than other organs?
Right now, they talk a lot about kidneys and I think in general, the organs of the body are where they'll begin to accumulate. So, but I know kidneys in particular and liver, I know that.
The endocrine system.
I have a
Yes.
question. I have actually more than one question, so you can stop me. Were you involved in the Hudson? You know, it was a pretty intense time in Hudson for people to be lined up going out onto the street to get I was going to say a deck. What are those things called? A bottled water, which of course had its own issues. But you said it was really kind of tough negotiations. Were you involved? I mean, do you know that the owners of those two companies, did they want to not do what they needed to do, or?
No, I mean, my understanding was that there were negotiations through DEP and the town. I mean, everybody was present, and that that was more of a negotiation than them saying no. There was no way to move. The well was right there. What was in the well was in the companies that were producing it, and so it was really a negotiation around what kind of resources, what kind of money they were going to be able to do. And you have to be careful because companies can just call bankruptcy, which has happened in other towns, other states, and then you're not left with anything too. So I thought they did a tremendous job both in making sure and ensuring that they remediated the PFAS in the water and that they were able to negotiate in a smart way to bring monies to the town to help with remediation. I mean, it was pretty impressive to see everybody working together too, and it really was local and state government working together.
Nice.
It's
good to hear.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
Oftentimes, people attack the wastewater facilities for the PFAS that are found in bio-waste and such. Is there a part of the bill that plans to address helping these private wastewater facilities with remediation of the PFAS within bio-waste?
I mean, to some degree. I mean, any of the monies that we'll put towards grants would be there for anyone to try to access in terms of remediation for PFAS. So to that extent, yes, it would be available.
On that, would it be tested, or is it tested today, the wastewater from the plants?
Yeah, they're tested. I mean, it's tested.
That's how we come up with our standard for what's allowable and what's not allowable, what's permissible for injection back into the water system.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So is there any funding included in the bill for water quality initiatives to start looking at PFAS in addition to some of the other stuff they're currently looking for? Like maybe nonprofits that go into the Assabet to take different samples?
Well, we do that already. We do a lot of testing in the Assabet. We do water quality and actually we're able to I get them a grant every year, ORS, to do testing for all of it. And that's how they were able, there's an excellent report on contamination that they actually wrote, and it's probably on the ORS site, but the rivers, there was a river study that was really quite comprehensive, gave you a good idea that there was PFAS in the water, and by how much they were able to measure. So, yes.
I have a question. I think you probably explained it, but I'm not totally sure. In terms of the funding and in terms of Trump making cuts at the EPA, how much of this bill is dependent on getting money from the federal government? Or do you think it will be self-sustaining in Massachusetts through, you said maybe some lawsuits?
Well, that's where our hope lies, is that we'll be able to maybe have state funds, and then when the lawsuits start to come in, that this would be the place that they would come to. so that we'd already had experience in how we're able to get the monies out to communities and to the people that need it. And so when the money comes in, we'll be able to ramp that up. When the money, when that came in, we'd have the experience and the infrastructure to really help with it for.
Yeah,
Yes.
so kind of following up on that, I love the idea that public health is really the place for it to be sitting. And if there's a public health trust fund of some kind, that money could be put in for giving money back to communities to work on this, and a site where monies could be taken to continue on with the oversight and regulations that are going to need to be developed. Boards of health are going to say, well, we already do so much, now we're going to do more, and be able to provide them with the resources to do that.
Is Massachusetts paving the way for everyone else, or is there a critical mass of states already doing
There's a
something?
critical mass, there's really a critical mass in a number of states that have done things. You can imagine who they are. California has done quite a bit, New York, 5, 6, 7, 8 states that have taken some major steps. And we'll continue to, everybody's working on it at once. This, we hope, would be the bill that would lead the way for us. But we've been able to use other people's experiences also in writing the bill to know what might work and might not work too. So, well, thank you, everybody. And we will stay in touch, and I will definitely stay in touch and let you know how the bill is progressing and moving forward. And thank you.